solve the rational inequality, we have x plus 6 divided by x minus 2, which is less than 1. Okay, now here is our rational inequality. Now, the goal is to always get 0 on the right side of the inequality. So that means we have to subtract 1 to both sides of this inequality. And so this is the first step. The second step is x plus 6 divided by x minus 2 minus 1, and that's going to be less than 0. Okay, and so now what we're going to do is we're going to write this as 1 over 1 because we want to combine everything on the left side to then become one term. And so in order to do that, we got to find out what is the LCD between x minus 2 and 1. Well, the LCD between x minus 2 and 1 is just x minus 2. So what do we need to multiply by 1 to get x minus 2? Well, that is x minus 2. And then we have to do the same thing in the numerator. 1 times x minus 2 is parentheses x minus 2. Over here, we just need to multiply this by 1, and we're getting the same thing. So we get x plus 6 over x minus 2, and now we know that this is less than 0. Now, in step number 4, we have x plus 6 minus the quantity, don't forget the parentheses, x minus 2 over the denominator of x minus 2, which is less than 0. So now we need to distribute this sign here. So when we distribute that sign, we end up getting x plus 6 minus x, and the negative times a negative 2 is a plus 2, and that's all over x minus 2. So now the x's, x minus x is 0, and 6 plus 2 is 8. So now this becomes 8 over x minus 2, which is less than 0. Okay, so now what we've done is we determined what that looks like. Sorry for that. We determined that what this looks like is the rational inequality is 8 over x minus 2, which is less than 0. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to determine what are the interval boundaries for this. Okay, so the interval boundaries, we're going to take this rational inequality, which is 8 over x minus 2, and then set it equal to 0. Well, the numerator does not contain a variable. So the only interval boundary is going to be what we have in the denominator, which is x minus 2. We're going to set that equal to 0. And therefore, x is going to equal 2. But now, keep in mind, we're going to call this a restricted value. A restricted value means that we cannot plug in 2 in the denominator because it would make it undefined. So we need to make sure that we make note that this is a restricted value. Okay. So now, the next step is to write down what our number line would look like with that boundary point. So here is our number line. We're going from negative infinity to positive infinity. We have 0. In this case, we have positive 2 as our interval. So we have an interval 1 and then interval 2. Okay, so for interval 1, we're going from negative infinity to 2, and then interval 2 is going to go from 2 to positive infinity. Okay, so now let's use our testing points. But before we do our testing points, we're going to use this down here in step number 6 as our rational inequality that we're going to use to do the testing point. Now you can use the original one over here, but then you got to compare it to 1. So for interval number 1, we're going to pick the testing point here, 0. So x is going to equal 0, and now we're going to plug it in. So we have 8 over 0 minus 2. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. And 8 divided by -2 is -4. And is that less than 0? Well, the answer is true. So it's true for interval number 1. For interval number 2, we can pick the value of 3. So x is going to equal 3. So we have 8 over 3 minus 2. And that's 1. So 8 over 1, or 8 divided by 1 is 8. And is 8 less than 0? Well, the answer is false. So it's false for region number 2. So that means that interval 1 is our solution, but then we need to come back and take a look at what was the inequality symbol. Well, it's less than, so therefore we're not going to use a bracket, so the answer is going to be -infinity to +2, because that's going to be all the x values that we can plug in to that rational inequality, and it'll all be true. So let's go ahead and plug that in to our answers. So we have parenthesis -infinity, comma 2 with a parenthesis, check our answer, and there is our result.